I'm just getting my ducts lined up, or in a row as they say. So it's dry assembled, and what I'm trying to work out is that's where the previous end stop was. You can see the chunk out of the movable part as it collided with the, I think it was something like a 1/4 inch grub screw wound in and then subsequently welded back in. I've cleaned all that out because it was all smashed off. And I'm just trying to determine what's going to be the best way. I could simply just reproduce it on this side, but it seems a bit of a crappy way of providing an end stop, but I'm guessing the end stop is only really there for when it's being hand cranked. I can't believe that that would be the end stop required or even suitable should the stroke adjust not be retightened, and if somehow therefore it winds itself out on each stroke, it's got to come to a stop somewhere. Now you can see the witness marks here from that's the underside of that boss. I could stick a stop into the wheel, into the gear proper, but then I'm thinking, like, well, if he's going to break anything, maybe that's the best thing to break off. I mean, we don't actually want anything to break, but something that's repairable seems like a good plan. So I'm just having a weigh up as to what I mean, the easiest thing is to just re-drill in here. It'd be all fresh, so there's no damage, so there's no need for big globs of weld on the end of it, fortunately. Anyway, that's where we're at. That's the taper pin, fits into that. I've got to cut it down. Thanks to Gerald for that one. And well, thanks to all those people that sent me a cotter pin. How the hell you measure the things, I have no idea, but that's the one. I've opened up that. I don't know whether I've covered that in an earlier video or not. Maybe it got lost on the editor's floor. Interestingly, that is an oil hole there for lubricating that shaft in that bushing. There's no facility for greasing these bevel gears, because once that is on another half an inch up, it's in there as damn it covering it, which is making me wonder whether that end stop was added after the whatever crunch they had. Be interesting to see another Elliot 14M or 14S and have a look, see what the options are on that. Who knows? Anyway, that's where we're at. All the rest of the work today has been removing the burrs and hammer marks from whichever gorilla decided to take it off in the past. Getting rid of the burrs created from dot punching on these to stop them. I'm just going to put a blob of Loctite on to hold those in. Cleaned up all the countersunks. I've fitted the oil point, cleaned up the cap heads, and that's now fixed. I've checked the dimension of the piece that fits here, that's fine. So yeah, we're about had enough today. I think this bug I had last week's really took it out of me. That seems to work okay. I mean, it's not in tight, but that's an M6 cap head screwed up through the centre of the lead feed screw for the stroke adjust, and then a washer made. I've made the washer so that it contacts on a curved surface, so there's no big binding. Just come to a stop. That'll do me. Right, really have had enough today. So this morning we've had a clear around in the workshop, took up the scrap bag, which is basically shavings off the shaper and the lathe and the mill, and we had 25 kilos of them, and took that along to the scrap man and came back with 40 kilos of somebody else's scrap. Handy though, it's all bright mild steel, There's some oddball bit of shaft in them stuff. I mean, that's 60mm, that's 60mm. I haven't got anything like this, and just to buy a length of it, it starts at a tenner just to get it here. Needless to say, I didn't come back with the piece I wanted, but I've got stuff for future stuff. These sort of things are really handy for making packers out of, for clamping stuff down. So anyway, and we got a free bin. So yeah, not the best of trip, but it was worthwhile having a clear out. Interestingly, my neighbours just chucked out a wood burning stove, a steel one, British made, good quality, about 20 years old, but other than needing a new piece of glass in the front and some fire bricks, there's nothing wrong with it. That went into the boot because he wanted shot and was fed up of waiting for the guy to turn up. So we weighed it in, it was 100 kilos, and they pay 7p a kilo. So I took the £7 that worked out to, and yeah, converted it, put another few quid to it, and came back with this lot. Don't think my neighbour's going to want any of it. Anyway, we've took it all apart. We've decided to give a gloss coat to the ball gear, and I'm going to do the other internal fittings as well. I'm actually using a different colour for the inside, but this is grey as opposed to, I don't know what the hell we're calling that yet. Admiralty grey it's supposed to be, but this is more of a greeny grey. Anyway, it's just that I'm running out of the Admiralty and I've still got to do the carriage, so I figured the internal stuff could be a different colour. It's not going to see the light of day very often. Anyway, once that coat's come off, then we're going to build up the ball gear, fit that, and I need to get some gasket seal to fit around this face of the gearbox and the mating face on there, which I've cleaned up. But I don't have any gasket material. I don't really want to use straight silicone, so I'm going to get some tube of gasket sealer and then hang the gearbox on, get that out of the way. Then we'll pull the yoke back and degrease that finally and get some undercoat and top coat on that and start putting the thing back together. Got the ball gear back into the machine with the stroke adjust and the crank pin. A lot of pissing about with these clamp plates, I was told by the broken knuckles. Trying to get those set so this thing still moves without busting a gut on the crank handle. Apparently tight isn't right, they've got to be backed off a little bit, so that's what I've done. And that's back together. I was hoping to get everything else reassembled on here, but as suspected, I've missed a bit. The oil is on here. There's one there, and one there. They all want drilling out, and I bought some I think they call them button oilers, which are like a little push-in thing with a sprung ball bearing. I bought a pack of 10, and I'll be damned if I can find the things. So rather than have a tantrum, I've just having a bit of a tidy round. As you can see, it's crap everywhere. Frustratingly, I went to buy a tool chest because I'm sick and tired of having tools between different points. I've got a toolbox there with spanners in and sockets. I've got hand files and saws and a load of woodworking gear. I made up a little shelf for the Morse taper drills next to the lathe, which has been an absolute godsend. Although you don't want to look at the welding too close. Yeah. Anyway, it ain't going to fall down in a rush. I got another shelf there with mainly chucks and drill bits, but there's some bits of tooling in there, more bits of hand tooling in there. Everything's spread out. So I thought I'd get myself a little wheeled, I think they call them a tool chest on wheels. Went and had a look in our local Halfords store with a view to buying one. A full whack these things are 300 quid. The offer at the moment puts it at 175. So it's a chunk of money, and every one of the display units had got some form of fairly significant damage to it, in so much as, I mean, the main one of the model I was looking at had apparently been dropped. So it was about 4 degrees out square with crumple zones, which is pretty crappy. Of course, you know, it's 45-minute drive there, 45-minute drive back, came back, no tool chest, pissed off. Then start looking on the internet, and yeah, there's hundreds of them, and they range. You can buy a 5-foot tall thing with about a dozen drawers in it, but what I'm worried about is getting one that's lightweight and doesn't stand up to the riggers. There's no point in having one that ends up with your drawers don't open because the sides are bent and buckled. That's why I like the Halfords industrial range. Anyway, rant over. It's a nice sunny day. I'm short of vitamin D, so I'm going to get myself cleaned up, take the dog out for a good walk, come back in a better frame of mind. Might even clean my knuckles down. Seems the pinion gear fits okay, and the misalignment in the bearing shaft doesn't seem to be driving it in or out. I've just got the key slotted in, and I'll crank the ball gear around. I mean, it's all got to be lubed up and everything, but it doesn't appear to be binding, which is a relief. I mean, bearing in mind it's supposed to be fitted with a dowel, and that dowel wasn't fitted when I took it apart. So there's obviously a bit of leeway there now. Can only assume it's been taken out at some stage and not refitted. Anyway, it does mean that can come out and be painted, and will fit the oiler as well. Hey ho. So this is the pinion gear. I've cleaned up this face because it was, well, somebody's had a cold chisel on it and a right mess. Anyway, with the key, the original key fitted, there's a degree of movement there, so I'm going to make a new key, make that nice tight fit. You can see that there's a slight recess there, and when the nut's been wound on, it's barely catching it. There must have been some kind of washer. Anyway, I've made a new one with a recess on it. That's a nice snug fit over the ID of the thread, sorry, over the OD of the thread and into the ID of the gear. When I make the key, I've just got to make the key flush, so the top of it's flush with the face of that, and then that lot can be fitted together. I moved it back out of the way. I've fitted the oil push button doodah, whatever you call them. I haven't bought another pack and waited for them to arrive. So they're in. I'm wanting to get the gearbox back on now. So the next job is sort out the oil feeds for these outside bearings while they're, well, it's actually the other side. Sort them and then fit the gearbox. Then I should be ready for putting the yoke back in and whatever. I've taken the plunge and bought myself a tool trolley, which is yet to find its home, but at least now I can find stuff. So I've shifted what I got in that old toolbox, and now we have a tray with metric spanners, so that will never get used, and a tray with some yeah, the other sizes that aren't quite metric. I've got my micrometers somewhere where they won't get knocked about again. General crap, and yeah, there's also a top box, but I haven't brought that down yet. The actual box empty weighs 60 kilos. It's quite heavy weight, but given that I'm only intending ever to buy the one, I figured I might as well get a decent one rather than a lightweight tin can. So, yeah, plenty more to be going at. Interestingly, I've just spotted a couple of days ago another Elliot, no, not an Elliot, an Alba shaper, exactly the same model as mine. A few minor differences because of the age. It was a 10, 15, maybe even 20 year younger than mine. Currently at £100 on eBay. And the 18-inch one with the auto height adjust, or auto tool shift, whatever you call it, that went for 620 quid, which I think is a bit of a snip given the condition it was in. If only I could have fitted that in, but I think 2 shapers is enough for any workshop of this size. Anyway, onwards and upwards. So we got the yoke back up on the bench. Give it a good clean off with some white spirit. It's ready for its undercoat. This is the bearing which fits on the pin on the back of the ball gear, or a face of the ball gear for that matter. So as the ball gear rotates around, drives that pin point up and down, which in turn shifts this backwards and forwards, which is connected to the ram, which gives you your stroke forward and reverse. The other side pivots on another block and shaft arrangement. As my understanding is, running clearance on this is alright up to about 8 thou, so 4 thou the side. Using a set of feeler gauges, I have is it 4 thou and 6 thou. 4 thou will go down, 6 thou is getting a bit too snug, so my guess is it's somewhere around about 5 thou clearance. That's with the block pulled up one side. That face of the block is gold, and you compare it with that one. Nothing evident when I was cleaning it out to suggest that the oil ways were blocked, but it's picked up on that face, if I can get it to focus there. So there's a section there through to there, and it's obviously been picked up or had some crap go through it or something. So the next chance, you can see the remains of frosting there and at the top end, and pretty much all the way down the near face. Now when this is in the machine, the face that we're looking at is against the ball gear. So let me get the orientation right, that would be that way round. So I think this face, this end, that's the power stroke. Now I would have expected the galling to be on the power stroke side, but it isn't. But I might have me arse about face on this. So my next dilemma is now whether to set up some frosting pattern on here to hold some oil on both faces without taking off any depth of material. In which case that was the first time I've done any scraping. Should be educational. It's going to be hidden, who's going to see? Anyway, the purpose would be to get some better lubrication on those slideways. I don't want to take off any significant amount of material. I'm going to stick the telescoping gauges along the length and see if I can get a measurement of the amount of wear, and then get a coat of undercoat on it. The pinion gear housing, that's all ready now. I've made up and fitted a key with a small collar. That fits on lovely and snug now with no rocking about. So that can go on. Gearbox needs touching up on the bits that I couldn't reach when it was sat painting. And I've got my dad's been delivered by hand his vintage pipe flaring apparatus, is the nearest I can say, so I can set up some oil lines from these 2 points here up onto the top to a little manifold. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. I might even connect these 2 up to it, so it'll give me 6 little oil lines down, which makes sense. That's where we're at. Frosting. Not had a lot of time over the last week. Too many distractions. Anyway, had about 4 or 5 hours on it today, so I've cleaned out the gearbox, all the dust and crap that's settled on it, mounted that roughly, leaving a gap so I can squeeze in some mastic, and then on the inside I'm going to do the inside face down there, just to make sure there's no oil dribbling down the outside. Figured it'd be easier to work on the oil feeds for the additional pipe work, having it mounted, knowing where everything's going to be. Yoke's had its top coat. Next job's to try and work out how to scrape up that face. Got a feeling I'm going to have to cobble together some kind of high-speed steel scraper. Might be interesting. Other than that, not a lot else going on. Filled up my toolbox, or filling up my toolbox gently, but I need to get it out of the way. So the plan is to shift the temporary workbench out of the way, and the toolbox will fit in there. And then anything I'm working on will be on a temporary box down the middle of the workshop. It is saving me a hell of a lot of time pissing about searching for tools that I no longer have to do. Now I just have to search through, I think it's 12 drawers, which is a lot easier. Anyway, some progress, but nowhere near what I wanted to do. But you know, can't have it all. The Bubonic Plague struck, or came back later after tail end of last week. I'd had a head cold, and that came back with a vengeance. And sadly, I ran out of scotch, so I couldn't give it any medicine. Anyway, we're getting there. I figured once everything's mounted up, I can go around and touch it all up, because we've had a few accidents with the paint work. Yeah, of course it had to bounce 3 times, the thing that I dropped. Still, no major harm done. Spent half an hour cutting the oil grooves into the internal bushings. I don't know whether you can see that very well on the video. Basically using the lathe with a tool, boring tool, clamped in the post and broached it out. 15 thou deep. There's a oil feed line there, and then on the inside of the casting there's a groove running the full length of it. Obviously when the bearing's pushed up, that forms the bottom edge, and then there's 3 feed holes, one there, and then one right at the other end. All I've done is just connected them up. I've had the shaft in there, dribbled in some very thin 3-in-1 oil, within, apart from the initial feed, it then just sits there, doesn't soak through. I've spun the shaft by hand for 5 minutes. Everything's nice and free. Took it all out. As soon as the shaft came out, all the oil drained through rapidly. No dry spots, so I think that's good to go. I tried doing it by hand, and yeah, well, that didn't work. So ended up just putting, as I say, boring tool in and scraped it out. I've not done one in the middle, but the that sits near enough directly underneath the feed hole here, so it gets plenty of oil into the centre point, which then runs around the shaft. So yeah, that's good to go. So I've had a bit of a shuffle round and decided to take the mic and measure up. That's the slider which travels up and down the gap in the yoke. So it sits in there, we showed earlier. I'm trying to decide what to do with this galling here. There is around 3 thou of variation along here, that width. So we've got 2.873 one end, 2.872 the other end, and in the middle it's 2.875, so you know, three thou at worst between there and there. Measuring this, that dimension, I've measured it front to back, so across that point, and then the same height across that point, and there's a bit of variation front to back, but you're only talking a thou, maybe three thou at the worst. Anyway, what we end up with is at the midpoint where the oil feed comes in there, we got a 2.867 thou, and the gap it's running in is 2.875. When we take into account the minimum distances, we got a 2.862 up to 2.866, which gives us a running clearance. These are point values as opposed to the whole surface, of somewhere between 7 and 13 thou. 8 thou I believe is acceptable, 13's not. And what I wanted to do was clean up this surface with probably a bit of scraping, especially the gold one, if for no other reason than leaving some little oil pockets in there, and then do the same on the yoke, on that section there. If I've got 3 thou variation end to end, I could take a thou out there and basically not be bothered about it. This face is pretty good all the way down, but that would add another thou's worth of clearance, which would move me from 7 thou towards the 13 thou, which is getting a bit big, but it is only a thousandth, and it ain't exactly hurtling along. The other option would be to find somebody that could stick some silicon bronze braze onto that to build it back up, and then scrape it back, or machine it back. Probably machine it on the scraper, on the shaper. That would be a better job, but it's a big lump. I haven't got enough. You need an oxyacetylene to get it up to temperature, I think. I don't think my propane burner will do it. Or I reassemble it and see how it goes. It's not a huge job to take that out again. So I think what I'm going to do is scrape the yoke so that I get rid of that galling, and it should bring me to a more consistent gap, and then see what the options are, fit this and see how much plate's left. I mean, one option would be to machine in a couple of sections and slide in a piece of phosphor bronze. It only needs to be what, I don't know, 1/16 thick, 1/8 at most. And that would bring that back to a good surface contact. I mean, whether I covered the whole surface or not, I don't know. I could do. Could do them both, but the bottom side is not too bad. It's almost like a file mark, that. And because it's not running parallel with the surface, I'm inclined to think it is a file. Somebody's filing it. Don't know. Seems an odd way of doing it if it is. That's definitely gold though. Completely parallel with the direction of running. Anyway, food for thought. Going to upload this lot now and make this a new video. Not a huge amount of progress, but shaper's coming on now. There's less bits hanging about. I've had to stick a coat of paint onto that and around the arse face of the gearbox, which I couldn't have got to if they were together. That'll be dried off tomorrow, so I can get that mounted, get the pinion gear installed. I've had it dry mounted and it goes in, so that's a relief. And then I can push the thing back into there, set my temporary workbench up on the end of that bandsaw table, and start scraping in the yoke. I'm not going to spend hours at it because obviously don't want to remove too much material. But I don't think it'll. I think it could live with 1,500, 2,000 at most. Even if that's doing nothing more than bringing it all back to parallel. So there we go. It's Christmas in a week's time. Hurrah!